Hi, this is some questions answered regarding Dove Evolution Spot. Thanks for your inquiry. I get a lot of these questions, so I figured I'd put them in a video like this. Originally, this is for Mona. Do you believe this is a true representation of the beauty industry? Yes, I do. And it is really because when I asked the photographer to do the project and the retouch artist, I didn't ask them to do things like stretch the neck or make the eyes bigger. All I said to them was, go about this process the way you normally would. And the fashion photographer had done a lot of covers for magazines in Toronto. And so what they did was legitimately the sort of practice that the beauty industry does. And there was no interference on my end to exaggerate it or anything like that. What inspired you to convey such a strong message by creating the video the way you did? I mean, there are many simpler ways in which you could have argued against the unrealistic ways of the beauty industry. Why this one? Is it because you thought it would be more powerful to show the reality of their actions so clearly to the viewers and thus be more effective? I think, well, it started with a brief from Dove. They wanted to promote their campaign for real beauty and the Dove Self-Esteem Fund. And for me, I noticed that, I mean, always as an advertising guy, you're trying to find what it is that people gravitate to. And before and after shots of Photoshop imagery is one of those things where people are sort of obsessed with it. So just in the interest of trying to create a video that people would want to share and there'd be a wow factor besides a good message factor, it just seemed to me that a time lapse of a before and after, starting from a model before makeup, which you never see. You usually see the photograph retouched, but you never see the model before makeup. So I thought that if you show the model before makeup and then time lapse it, which is another way of doing a before and after, but it's more interesting because it's video, and then showing in exactly the same framing the actual retouching, then I figured that that process, even though it's a difficult and tricky one to do, would be incredibly interesting and cool to watch, whether you were into the subject matter or not. And that's sort of what came out. Did you consider changing anything major about the video before it was published? Yeah, you always, when you look at the footage and things haven't sort of worked out the way you want them to, you have to adapt and make some decisions in the edit room. One of the things that I never planned on doing was putting the titles up, Dove Evolution, or a short film, but that had to be done to fix continuity problems when we were pushing in on the model, which I actually didn't really want. But we got that anyway. And then when the lights flick on the sides of her, that all happened about 20 seconds apart. And what I really wanted on the day was for the face to be, the person to walk in, sit down, then jump to a close-up and click, click, click with lights, and then bang, you're into time-lapse. And that didn't happen. So I had to dip to black and then come back, and there was no reason to do that. So I had to create a reason to do that, and that reason became the title sequence. So it was a lucky accident because it gave, by having a title in this ad, in this viral ad, it gave people something to mention and talk about and share. So they say, have you seen that video? And it's called Dove Evolution, as opposed to, you know, have you seen the video with babies who rollerblade or something like that? It's good to have a title. Did you consider it? I just answered that. Do you think the timing is a significant factor? I mean, the fact that the video is fast-forwarded to that extent, is that really important? Yeah, I think the video started off being, I think, 2 to 3 minutes when the editor first sort of had a go, and then I really just wanted it to be as fast as possible, and if that meant that it was going to be 15 seconds, so be it. But we basically timed it without any time in mind, which is always a good place to start working creatively, and we just focused on, you know, at what speed does this footage become really interesting, and then what was happening is the head was bouncing around too much and the speed, you know, was making everything a blur. There were too many people in the background, foreground, we were too wide, So we ended up blowing up the image significantly, and then sort of taking out all the frames, because the second of film is made up of 24 frames, or 30 depending on where you live. And then so we took out the frames where there was too much clutter, and we stabilized the head using a post-production technique, so the eyes were sort of locked in the center of the frame. But I think all those things, the timing, keeping the face centered, removing too many of the extras that were around, and all the fuss, and making it all about the face, I think that was incredibly important to making the before and after video have as much impact as possible. As a man, do you ever feel pressured by society? Well, I wasn't always a man. I was a woman until I was 13, and then I had a sex change because I hated the pressure. Just kidding. I didn't really feel a lot of pressure as a man. I grew up in Australia. I played a lot of sport. The measure of a man was how well he played sport, and he had to have a bit of a brain. So I didn't really focus on my looks too much, but maybe I should have. I certainly care more about it now that I'm 40, getting fat, or at least having a beer gut. So I take steps. But no, I don't feel the pressure that women face. I think they face a lot more pressure. But part of the reason for working on this is because I have no idea what it's like to be a woman, because I grew up with all brothers and went to an all-boys school. So it always fascinated me how women think, and I still don't get how they think. But when I had girlfriends and friends that were obsessed with how they looked, it just didn't make sense to me. So I think part of that lured me into this subject matter because I just found it incredibly fascinating and interesting, and I thought that there was a wrong that needed to be corrected. How big of a problem do you consider this to be, prejudice based on women? Well, I think it's a huge problem. My wife and I worked on a documentary film about the subject matter, and we spoke to girls who were 5 and we spoke to women who were 95. And they all face an incredible amount of pressure, and it's very strange to me that they do, because it didn't matter what they looked like. They could be models, and in fact usually if they were models they felt more pressure than anyone else, and it was unusual, I guess, to hear a 60-year-old say it's just great not to feel the pressure anymore. It was interesting to hear a 40-year-old say that they can't believe how no one looks at them in the street anymore. It's like they suddenly became irrelevant overnight. That was sort of upsetting to hear. And it's really upsetting to hear young girls as young as 5 and 6, sort of some of them broke down in tears, saying how their parents often call them fat and are watching them, like they're under a microscope. And that's putting so much emphasis on looks that I think the parental influence, which is what Doug really wanted us to focus on, as well as the media, that plays a huge role. And I think that society needs to educate parents a little bit more to show that even if you're praising girls and saying they're beautiful, just by putting emphasis on the importance of physical appearance, you're undermining, I guess, the substance of a person's character, and you're putting something else ahead of that, which is just a bad message, period. I think advertising is all to blame, and the media, but then I think it's made worse by parents who don't understand the psychological issues behind reinforcing those values. And I guess the parents think it's important because they see the media and advertising and films and how, the good-looking girl or the princess gets what she wants. So that must be important. But it can take a lifetime to realize that there are things that are more important. I'm hating the sound of my own voice, so I'm going to stop. Thank you. Your teacher is excited. Excellent. Thanks, Mona. Any other questions, let me know.